Hey guys, and welcome to the official podcast of Develop Your Element Unplugged, and this is episode 13. Episode 13, we're going to be talking about turning pitfalls into superpowers, because here at Develop Your Element, we like to talk about personal development, entrepreneurship, personality psychology, personality theory, not to put you in a box, not to label you, not to limit you, but really to become the best version of you and to unlock all those capacities that you have inside. And yes, it sounds cheesy, it sounds generic, but we do it with a very logical way. One thing that happens is when we are drained, when we are burned out, when we are stressed, when we have brain fog, we are just not as productive, we're just not as kind, we're just not as empathetic, we're just not as flexible. We become the worst version of ourselves. And then when we are recharged with a good battery level, when we have inner peace, when we are passionate, inspired, when we are motivated, we are so much more productive, so much kinder, so much more generous, so much more empathetic. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about the different types of personalities. Sometimes we talk about 3 different types: extroverts, ambiverts, and introverts. And sometimes we talk about 6 different types, which are the 6 elements in Develop Your Element. We generally talk about how we're a mix of all the different types. There's rarely anyone who is... we're all multidimensional beings. We all have different instincts in different moments, in different environments, in different situations. We step more into certain personalities than others. And here at Develop Your Element, we don't want to ever limit you and tell you that just because you're this personality, you can't do this. No, we just talk about if there's something that's outside of your comfort zone, something that requires a little bit more effort, a little bit more work, then you should recharge your battery before and after doing that. And you should also develop certain skill sets that might not be as natural to your personality. It's called Develop Your Element because we understand that we all can develop certain skill sets. We all can learn new things. Even the most introverted person can learn to become more charismatic, more social, more agile in social environments. Even the most extroverted person can structure themselves and organize themselves. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the different personalities and how their instincts can sometimes take them down a bad path, and sometimes with a little bit of self-sabotage, they can amplify certain pitfalls, but also how with a bit of effort, a little bit of consciousness, a little bit of awareness, you can turn those pitfalls into something great. There are certain character traits that, depending on how you apply them, how you direct them, can really be a big difference in terms of, for example, confidence. Confidence can inspire people, or it can turn off people and stress people and frustrate people if it's a false arrogance. Expressions of emotion can deepen relationships, or it can create tension, drama, and conflict. These capacities that we have, it's all about directing them in the right way, managing them in the right way, and using them to build bridges instead of building walls or burning bridges and creating conflicts. So this is obviously influenced, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. If you're drained, if you're insecure, things get directed in a more negative way. So that's what we want to avoid. We want to talk about the triggers. We want to talk about many different things. And today my sister joins me. And welcome back. And
thank you.
Let's talk about turning pitfalls into superpowers.
Yeah, no, this is a great topic because I think a lot of us have certain parts of our personalities that we feel insecure about, that we judge, that we feel are exactly our pitfalls. This thing that's wrong with me that I can't figure out, this thing that's wrong with me that maybe is the reason why you're getting into personal development. Maybe you're getting into personal development because you think you're too this or not enough this. I know in the case of our mom, there were a lot of things about her personality that she thought were too gray, too boring, too slow, too this and too that, based on what she was taught growing up. And then through Develop Your Element, she's kind of discovered how, those same traits can be very kind, can be very nurturing, can be very beautiful, can make people feel comfortable and at ease. And it's exactly based on what you say. It's what have we decided about our traits based on the judgments and rejections we've received, the situations we've had in our life, but also how are we applying it? How are we using it? It's so easy to get caught up in the moment and lose track of how we're using our personalities because we don't feel like we have control. We don't learn that we have control over how we apply our personality. We just go, well, this is how I am, so either I'm screwed or I'm not. So yeah, I'm very excited about this topic for today.
It's an important topic because I know a lot of people who devalue themselves, that basically are very hard on themselves and reinforce certain negative narratives about themselves.
Yeah.
And sure, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
We all make mistakes. We all have been in those moments of just pure fatigue where we just don't have patience, where we snap or we say the wrong thing or we do the wrong thing. We miscalculate our intensity. We misdeliver our message. Or even if we are so insecure that we might create certain drama or certain conflict or things. And we've all been there in some moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what personality you are. I think we've all kind of, in some moments, made mistakes with our personality.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if you've been told your whole life that, oh, this is wrong, or you did that wrong, or this is bad, or you shouldn't do that, or you should be more like this, or why can't you be more like
your
this
sibling?
Exactly. And so we start believing that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's not wrong. It's not that, mistakes, we obviously should learn from them. We should grow. We should not just accept it as the status quo. But it doesn't have to define us completely.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't just conclude that, oh, that's part of my personality, so it's part of me, and as a result, I can't change it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about changing your personality. It's simply, how can I communicate with other people so that they can understand me better? How can I be more empathetic? How can I work on my insecurity so that I don't create the conflicts that I might be creating? And it requires being very self-aware. It requires being very self-critical, but also self-critical, but not in a pessimistic way. In an optimistic way about the possibilities, about being able to change things. And we're not saying get rid of certain character traits. We're just saying each character trait can be used in a positive and a negative way.
Yeah.
So it's not about trying to become something you're not. It's just redirecting and managing and you taking control of your personality, so instead of your personality controlling you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, they don't realize that they can do that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel that this is part of me, so deal with it.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people who reinforce things in their mind. Some people have read something and it's like, oh, because my brain is just wired a certain way. And obviously if people suffer from depression or they have ADHD or anxieties and things like that, I understand that there are certain instincts that get amplified.
Yeah.
And those instincts can be harder to manage.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean you can't do things about things. And we talked about this in the previous episode. And we obviously talked about, first of all, we're not doctors. We're not here to replace any professional healthcare options and things like that. But we want to bring awareness that there are many different things you can do to change a lot of things in your life that you might not be happy with.
Yeah.
And we always talk about, diversify, mix things, good diet, good exercise, good supplements, good if you need medicine, whatever. But here at Develop Your Mind, we focus on the mind. We focus on changing certain internal narratives, overcoming fears, overcoming insecurities with certain exercises, with certain actions that we can take that can desensitize us to certain negative narratives. So I mentioned this because I know we have listeners who do have that kind of mentality that they're kind of stuck and they can't change things because that's how they are wired and that's just who they are. And I'm going to be honest with you. I've seen people come in with every type of conclusion about themselves and change a lot of things for the better. And I think in this episode, we want to paint this picture of, okay, these are the possibilities, and very tangible, simple, logical possibilities. And obviously, each one of you is going to define your own path, your own goals, your own method. Nothing in development is one size fits all. But we do challenge you to take certain actions and reflect on certain things, because I don't want anyone to conclude that, oh, they are this way. The amount of people I've heard say, oh, I'm broken, or I'm just damaged goods, or I'm this or that.
Yeah.
Like, those narratives, they're not healthy, obviously. I don't need to mention that. But they don't help to make those positive changes.
Yeah.
And hopefully, if you're listening to this, it's because you have an interest in personal development.
Yeah.
So let's start developing some personalities, some people.
Yeah, if we start going into the different personality types that we talk about, again, just to repeat, we are a mix of all of them. So if you're new to this, you'll probably either identify yourself with several of them, or maybe you won't even identify yourself clearly with any of them right from the beginning. This is a journey of self-discovery. This is something where you start applying certain tools to your life. You start seeing how you act and how you respond and what your instincts are. You start filtering out the noise between what's most natural for you and what isn't. Maybe before going into the types, I'll recap a bit that we talk about 3 different states of our personality. We're not only made up of one side or one thing. We have what's the biological state, which is what's most natural to you. That is how your brain is wired. That is how you function naturally. That is something that you're not going to change just because you want to. You can change how you use it, how you apply it, how you direct it. You can change whether you embrace it or whether you reject it. But you're not going to completely change personality in that aspect, in that state. We also have the societal state, which is the social influences, the cultural influences, the people in your life that have encouraged you or discouraged you from acting in certain ways, from pursuing certain things, from doing certain things, where you start shaping your personality or part of your personality according to that, according to, oh, this is how people act, so it must be how I should act, or this is what I've been told a lot, so I should probably listen to that. Last, we have the passion project state, which is when you're so passionate about something, you forget to sleep, you forget to eat, you forget what time it is. You can be so fully invested in this project because you really, really love it. It doesn't have to be something that makes you money. It just has to be something that you're excited about. And in those moments, you have double battery. You have double flexibility. So sometimes you can perform in a different personality than what might be biological for you because you're so passionate about it and you've somehow decided or figured out that, okay, for this project to work, this personality is the one that's going to help me out. So you are probably going to identify yourself with several of them. Over time, you're going to start realizing what's most natural for you, what's the biological type. And that's the one that we really want to focus on because it's the one that affects your energy levels in terms of if you stimulate it more, if you embrace it more, if you learn how to apply it in a positive way, that can really energize you, that can really boost your happiness, your productivity, your creativity, all those good things. So once now going into the types, we start off with the electric type, which is the most extroverted. They're very adventurous. They're very fun-loving. They're jokesters. They're very social. They like to move around a lot. They're adventurers. For them, new things, different things, exciting things are things that are very, very motivating for electric people.
Yeah, and electric people are people that often growing up are told that they're immature, they don't finish things, they're irresponsible, that they're too childish, that they take too many risks, and they're judged a lot about this. And as a result, sometimes electric people become afraid of being themselves. They become afraid of the consequences of their actions. And while they are very impulsive, sometimes they get into trouble because they are so impulsive. And if they've gotten into very big trouble, they start fearing maybe that side of themselves. And then they start trying to control it, but they can't control it. So it bursts in the wrong moments, and they end up having less control over their personality.
Yeah, no, for all of the personality types, the more you try to control yourself from a place of self-judgment and insecurity and so on, the more difficult it's actually going to be to control your personality, because you're putting so much energy into resisting who you are that you get drained, and then you don't have the energy to navigate your personality very well.
Yeah, and the idea with all the different personalities is exactly stop resisting it, just direct it in the right way, because it needs to keep flowing. It needs to keep being stimulated, but stimulated in a healthy, a positive way.
Yeah.
So with electric people, if you direct it into a more productive space, a more like a healthier social group, they need a lot of socialization. So if they kind of pick their friends right, and if they focus on, they have a great capacity for generating great ideas. If they team up with people who have a great capacity for landing those ideas, delivering those ideas, reaching the finish line with those ideas, it's an amazing skill set they have. And they really have this brilliant capacity to uplift people, make people laugh, make uncomfortable situations more comfortable. Obviously, it depends how they direct it. They also know how to make you feel very uncomfortable with their silly jokes in the wrong timing, in the wrong moment. But it's all about knowing how to direct it. So, moving on.
Continuing with the fiery type, also extroverted, but much more focused, much more project-oriented. These are people that they like results. They like efficiency. They like productivity. They like achievements. They like being leaders. Any type can be a leader. Any type can be a good leader. Any type can be a bad leader. But fire types, they like seeking out those leadership positions. They like being in charge. They like making decisions. They like moving and inspiring people. And, in their case, on the negative side of things, if they don't know how to calculate their personality, they can come across as very arrogant, very full of themselves. They'll talk a lot about themselves because they get passionate about their projects and what they're working on, and they like showing off. But if they don't calculate that well, then obviously they're going to come across as self-centered and arrogant. So they can reach a point where they've been judged so much for that they become afraid of expressing their opinions, that they become afraid of seeking out leadership positions, they become afraid of standing out, which are all things that regenerate them.
Yeah, and fears can go both. I mean, with all personalities, two things can happen. So either they can be afraid of it, and it's also depending on the mix of personalities and the personal context. I'm fiery myself, and for example, because of my combination of personality and my context and my education, I became very afraid of expressing myself because maybe I expressed myself too intensely, too passionately. I got afraid of showing off and things like that because I was told growing up and living in places like Denmark and Japan that have cultural rules about not standing out. I was told that it was wrong to stand out, so there were periods of my life that I would be afraid of. Like I would use a lot of self-deprecating humor to put myself down, to be more relatable, I guess. And but there's another thing that can happen: overcompensation. Overcompensation and forcing a personality. So sometimes people get arrogant and like, this is who I am, and I'm not gonna let anyone change me, and blah blah blah, and they get forceful with any personality. But in the case of fiery types, what happens is if they feel insecure, they're gonna brag more, they're gonna show off more, they're gonna put other people down to uplift themselves. They'll get defensive every time someone critiques them and not focus on solutions but focusing on winning their argument or emphasizing things. We don't know a certain president of a certain very powerful nation that would ever do that on Twitter and such. So I mean, the reality is every single personality can either be afraid of the personality or can overcompensate and force the personality. And that's something that neither of those are healthy. You want a balance. You want a level of self-awareness. You want a certain level of humility, but not fake modesty. And just focus on directing your personality.
I mean, if we look at the electric type, the same thing applies. They can either go to the extreme of being afraid of their personality and suppressing their personality. I know I did that. I have a strong electric side that I became afraid of using because I received a lot of judgment and rejection for it. So nobody saw that part of me for many, many years. But yeah, it can also go to the other extreme where it's like, sorry, this is who I am, and then just forcing it. Like every disaster, every adventure, every high adrenaline rush activity you can imagine, one after the other, with that undying hunger, which is what can happen when you're forcing your personality. You're not actually really regenerating. You're not actually reaping the benefits of being in your personality because it's so forced. So then you get more desperate for that stimulus that you're looking for. So that can happen with all the personalities. If we continue on to the aquatic type, it's the first of the ambiverts, which means that it leans a little bit more extroverted among the two ambiverts. Yeah. And these are very emotionally expressive, sentimental people who focus a lot on personalizing things and sharing deep and special moments with loved ones. They want to deepen their relationships as much as they can, strengthen their relationships as much as they can. And they share their emotions very openly because for them, that's a tool for creating intimacy and closeness. And again, like if they haven't learned how to use that effectively, that can mean that there's a lot of drama, that there's a lot of negative emotions being expressed primarily, that there's a lot of, you don't love me, you don't miss me, nobody pays attention to me, I'm all alone. Aquatic people, when they're drained or insecure, they can feel very lonely, and it can be hard for them to see love and appreciation from other people that simply is expressed in a different way from how they themselves would express it, because they're so open with their emotions. And most of the other types are a little bit more reserved with their emotions. They maybe want to process them first, or they maybe might not be sure about when's the right moment to express it, or how's the right time to express it, or how's the right way of expressing it. And to the aquatic person, that can feel like, oh, nobody loves me, nobody pays attention to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, the abilities that aquatic people have, it's amazing. They can connect with you and express themselves like no other. But yes, it is very, very common to see them when they have insecurities, create a lot of separation, to have a moment of
makeups and breakups.
Makeups and breakups. I mean, they are the masters of, what is it they call it, breakup sex? They love the drama. They love that feeling. And the problem is they can get addicted to that. And I mean, all personalities, if they don't know how to receive love naturally, as in understand that different people communicate love and affection with different ways. Some do it with words, some do it with actions, some do it just being there with you. And any personality that doesn't know how to receive love will certainly do certain things to try to amplify it or feel it more intensely, but it is more common, and you'll see it with more intensity with the aquatic types. Yeah. So if you find yourself in that situation where you're creating drama to feel connected to someone, if you are doing all these different things, reflect on how that really can, in the long run, deteriorate your relationship and create the opposite of what you're seeking. And there are other ways to deepen a relationship, feel that sensation, improve the communication. That's not forced, that's not manipulative, that's much more friendly. Yeah,
and the point is not to judge yourself for it. The point is really to acknowledge what's happening so that you can do something about it. And exactly, more mature communication, asking questions to your loved ones. Hey, how do you like to receive love? How do you like to express love? What for you makes you feel loved? What is your instinct when you feel love or affection for someone? Learn how that other person functions in those spaces and with those emotions, because sometimes there'll be many little things that they're doing to show you that they love you, that they care about you, that they appreciate you, that you might just not be seeing because it's not your way of expressing things. That's something that's very important for...
Yeah, I mean, here, now that we get into the personality of aquatic types, I think it paints a little bit more of a bigger picture when we talk about turning pitfalls into superpowers, because in the beginning we emphasized this idea that if you recharge your internal battery. If you work on your insecurities, you are gonna feel much more energized. You're gonna be much more generous, much more empathetic, much more patient, much more flexible. You'll be a much better version of you. You'll have more mental clarity to direct your personality to things that are more productive instead of destructive. There are many benefits from taking into account those things. But I think another one that gets very emphasized when we talk about the aquatic type is this idea that I have to sneeze. That's a very good idea. This idea that improving empathy, improving understanding, awareness of differences, understanding personality psychology is very, very powerful, because it allows us to not only change how we feel internally, it allows us to receive much more kindness, much more generosity. It allows us to also communicate with much more kindness and generosity in a way that other people can understand, because we all speak different languages. My sister and I have different personalities, so the way I would communicate the same point is very different than how she would communicate the same point. And sometimes that can create an issue where I'm trying to communicate one thing, but she will receive something else, because I don't speak the same language, I don't use the same body language, the same narratives, the same metaphors. We have different contexts, and that's something that all the personalities must understand. But when it comes to the aquatic types, I think they'll end up feeling much more loved, much more supported, much deeper connections, much deeper bonds with people, if they start understanding how we all function a little bit differently, and how they can express their emotions and feelings in a way that other people can receive instead of resist, and also how they can receive that love and affection and communication despite it not being delivered in the way they would have ideally liked.
And this, as you said, this is going to apply to everyone. It's obviously emphasized a bit for the aquatic type, but it does apply to everyone. If we go on to the next type, the earthly type, we'll see these are people that are very kind, very generous, very nurturing. They're people that love making other people happy. They love making people feel comfortable. They love harmony. For them, a harmonious and comfortable space is one of the most nurturing, one of the most enriching experiences for them. So they'll focus a lot of attention on other people. It's very easy for earthly people to forget about themselves in favor of taking care of other people. Now, that sounds really great, but a way in which they can misdirect that is if they have this need of helping people that's so intense, and they don't know how other people function. They don't know what other people really need based on their personality. They can become very insistent with their help, and they'll decide what's best for the other person and kind of push it on the other person, like, hey, no, you need more blankets, don't you? You need another jacket, cover up, you need to be warmer, or eat more food, or drink more water, do more this, do less this. And that's one thing that came into play a bit in our relationship.
No, never. She lies.
Because Yannick has a very strong earthly side where he would try to help me in order to express his love, in order to express his support, in order to express how much he cared about me. He would try to help me and support me in a lot of things. But the way that I received that based on my personality was I felt that I was being judged, that I was being criticized, that I was being controlled, that I was being overprotected. And I felt like I wasn't given a lot of liberty to be myself. So that's one of those things that as an earthly person, if you can also understand how different people maybe need to go through different processes in different ways, then it's easier, because you don't have to force yourself to all the time be solving everybody's problems. Because sometimes letting other people go through their own process can be more empowering for them.
Yeah, that's a hard one for earthly people. Earthly people, they want to help. They're very, very generous. They mean very, very well. I mean, it's a very strong instinct. And they're very diplomatic. They're very caring. But they certainly can get insistent when it comes to taking care of people and helping people. And I think one very important point for earthly people is to learn timing and intensity. I know with me, when I'm more drained, when I'm more insecure, when I'm more worried about something, I miscalculate my intensity much more frequently. I mistime things more. and as a result, I don't get the impact I desire. Another thing we talk about, and this will help earthly people feel more secure about themselves, is stop helping people who are ungrateful, who are addicted to being victims, are addicted to being stuck, are addicted to the conflict, who never are happy, who never are satisfied. Because what happens, earthly people will feel like a failure if they don't see some type of either gratitude or progress or evolution or growth or happiness as a result of their actions. Earthly people are not selfish people. They are very selfless, but their self-worth will go down. I tell you this because I had certain family members who I actually spend more time focusing on their businesses, on their projects, helping them with their things, getting them to forward. I gave them so many opportunities. I opened many doors for them, and they were just, every time I did something new, they would tell me why I hadn't done something else yet, and they would complain, and they would use ways of kind of putting me down instead of receiving the actions and the generous acts. And I always felt like a failure. And then I realized that there are other people who were ready to level up, who were ready to receive things, who were much more grateful, who expressed gratitude either with words or with actions. And then I decided, you know what? I understand that these are my family, but I'm not going to get stuck trying to make someone happy who doesn't want to be happy. I believe people can change their lives. I believe people can get unstuck, but I think there has to be a desire behind it, and you cannot force that desire on someone. So I've seen people turn their lives around big time from every type of trauma, of every type of conflict, of every type of mental challenge, but it's when there is desire, when there's motivation, when there's a decision made. If there's no decision made and they like reinforcing the status quo, then there's really very little you can do. I mean, you can do certain actions to regenerate a person. You can do certain actions to educate a person. But if someone is totally closed, and it requires so much more effort, and in the same time I would maybe try to help one family member, I could help 10, 20, 100 other people, right?
Yeah.
And I think for earthly people, knowing when to say, okay, maybe I should redirect my efforts is a big thing, because I know the moment I started redirecting my efforts to study more grateful people, people who were looking to level up in their lives, people who were looking for change, I started being much more successful in helping them, and I started feeling much better as well.
And moving on to the airy type, it's the first of the introverts. This is a personality that really requires a lot of personal space, enjoys having a lot of personal space, both physically and mentally, because they're people that like to understand how things work. They like understanding the different nuances, the different angles, the different perspectives. How do people think? Why do people think the way they think? Why do they do what they do? Why does this situation work the way it works? Why is this happening the way it's happening? These are people that really like understanding things with a lot of depth, and they don't necessarily have to come to a conclusion. They're very flexible with seeing different nuances of things and different perspectives on things, but that also means that they can get overwhelmed. They can get oversaturated with so many different perspectives and so many different angles and so many different possibilities that they can get a bit lost in that mix, and having a certain amount of personal space can help them process everything that's going on and get more clarity of what their own thoughts are and what their own processes are. Mm-hmm. And these are people that, in a great state, they can find a lot of solutions to problems that nobody else has thought of, because they're looking at all these nuances and details that other people might miss. These are people that know how to create a plan that creates the least resistance, because they don't like creating conflict. They don't like intensity. They don't like drama. So they can look at and analyze the situation and see, oh, look, if we take this path and these steps, we can have these results in a very nice, comfortable way. But this can also be taken to an extreme where they won't take action, they won't speak up. It can be very difficult for an airy person sometimes to take action and speak up, because if they don't feel confident in the decisions they've made, in the ideas they've developed, if they're still stuck in the process of constantly looking for alternatives, constantly looking for different angles, constantly looking for different ways in which something could play out, it's very easy to get paralyzed and stuck in that situation. So these are also people that might disappear socially for extended periods of time because they can get so drained from pushing themselves to find like the perfect answer, but their process is getting stuck in looking at everything all the time.
And it's very important for people to understand that sometimes they have to take a step into the unknown to get the information that they need and they seek.
Yeah.
Because that's something I've seen many times, that airy people, they get stuck. They get stuck with this idea that, I need more information. I need to take into account all the shades of gray, all the nuances, all the variables, but they don't have the data yet. And sometimes, I mean, this is something that can happen to a lot of personalities. This happens a lot in entrepreneurship and in business. This, when you're very data-driven and you're doing something new for the first time, there is no data. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have to take a step to generate the data and build your own data and through analytics and get the information and the insight. But airy people have to learn that in their own lives, that sometimes they have to take steps to collect the data, even if that means taking risks and stepping into situations that might be a little bit more uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So we have to talk about that with all the personalities, but emphasize it with the airy type. So as you probably will notice, a lot of the things we talk about with all the different types is relevant across different personalities. It just the intensity and the frequency in which they would need to hear that advice is different. But there are also types of advice that are different based on personalities. Yeah. And different people need to hear different things. So, yes, airy types understand. Sometimes you have to take an action to get unstuck. And another thing, airy types, they like having a lot of personal space. And they like reinforcing that to themselves and to others. But they're also a social being. Every single person is a social being. Mm-hmm. Yes, introverts, they're more comfortable with one or two people rather than multiple people around. Yes, it takes time for them to build certain confidence in certain environments and become comfortable, but they still need
some degree of
they need social connections. They need human connections. And I know airy people who sometimes escape and disappear for a long time, and then they feel like they're being abandoned or they feel like they're being excluded. But that's the signal they've sent to people. It has happened a lot with my sister, that she sent me the signal that she wants space, and all of a sudden she's like, but you ignored me, or you abandoned me, or you didn't include me. And I'm like, but you're invited. You can come anytime. And but the signals you send out sometimes aren't the same as what you really need and desire.
Yeah, I think something that's important to understand, if you're the not airy person and you have airy people in your life, them needing personal space doesn't mean you can't ever talk to them. It doesn't mean you can't ever invite them to stuff. They like and appreciate being included. This goes for both of the introverts. They like and appreciate being invited to stuff and included in stuff. They like having information to work with, knowing what the options are so they can make their own decisions. Not having information means it's more difficult to make your own decision, and that can be very stressful for introverts. Now, if you are an introvert, definitely learning how to communicate that is very important. Being able to say, I need a lot of personal space, but that doesn't mean I don't want you to invite me. That doesn't mean I don't want you to include me. That doesn't mean I don't want you to seek me out. It just means that if I say no or don't join you on something, it's not personal. And being able to make that distinction for people can be very helpful. I know that for me, once I was able to communicate that to people, so many things changed because, yeah, I wanted space, but I didn't want to be completely ignored and left out either.
Yeah, and for airy people, another thing that it's important is their internal narratives. They have to take control over them. Yeah. Because they're very good at emphasizing negative things. They're also very good at taking into account all the possibilities, and as such, they have a great ability to imagine all the possible things that can go wrong.
Yeah, yeah, it's really based on where our focus is. I'm aware of this from personal experience. We have to be aware of where our focus is and what our goals are. If our goals are to figure out what's wrong with something, or
They will
what
find it.
can go wrong, we will find it. We can analyze every possible situation. We can take in all the information and see how everything could possibly go wrong. But if our focus is on how things can go right and how things can work and how things can get better and how we can achieve certain goals, we can also find that. It's the same mental capacity, just applied differently.
Yeah, and it's very. I think every people, not to spend too much time because we're trying to get through them all, so you get a complete picture. It's really take control over your mind, direct your mind, because what happens is introverts, their energy goes inward. Extroverts, their energy goes outwards. So while extroverts have to manage which way they direct their energy outwardly, more socially, more collaboratively, more outwardly, introverts, when it's inwardly, it's a lot into the mind. So they have to direct their mind down more productive, positive paths, right? Yeah. And there are many different things that one can do for that. And we have episodes that tackle many different specifics. Today we're trying to paint a general picture of these are how the same personality can take something and redirect it in two different ways. Yeah. With the airy types, it's really just directed into possibilities instead of all the different things that can go wrong. Communicate externally your needs, including being included. It sounds weird because they will seek some solitude, but at the same time they want to feel included and invited. So communicate that to people. So moving on to the metallic type. The metallic type, very logical, precise, exact, structured, have certain routines. They like being able to predict their days. They don't respond as well to last minute changes. They like being so exact and precise that sometimes they can say things without filter so directly that it hurts. And it's very, very important to direct these things in a positive direction as well. Yeah. I mean, the ability to critique, to perfect, to improve things, to solve problems is impressive. But just be aware that if they're drained and insecure, they're going to direct it in a you suck way instead of a here's a possibility to improve it way.
Yeah, one thing that happens a lot with metallic people is that they, unlike or in contrast with the airy type, they do want to reach certain conclusions. When they're analyzing things, when they're thinking deeply about things, when they're observing things, they do eventually want to collect enough data to come to a conclusion about what's going to work, what's not going to work, what's the best course of action. Because for them, that efficiency and that pragmatism is really important. That frees up their mental space for other things. And they like digging deep into their interests. So if they're having to spend too much time thinking about what to eat, how to dress, all the basic things of life, that takes away from them being able to dig deep mentally into their personal interests. So they do eventually want to reach a conclusion, but sometimes they do reach slightly premature conclusions, or they don't widen their data pool enough. They have a bit the opposite problem of airy people. Airy people widen their data pool a bit too much sometimes and get lost in the mix. Metallic people, they'll see a certain trend, or they'll get to a point where they trust a certain expert or a certain source of information, and once they've concluded, oh, this person knows what they're talking about, or this is how people act, or this is how this situation works, sometimes it's difficult for them to update that idea in their own head. And they can get stubborn with that because they've already thought about it, they've already proven it, they've already verified it. So why would anyone say anything different? So for metallic people, it's important to realize that if you do really want to have those great results, if you really want to be pragmatic, if you really want to be efficient, if you really want to perfect things, once in a while you can create a routine of it, a certain amount of time, looking and going over certain ideas you've developed, certain thought patterns you've developed, certain conclusions you've taken about different things. Look and see, is there new data out there? Is there new information out there? Are there sources of information that tell me something different from what I've concluded? And then, look at what ideas need to be updated. I think that's something that can be very important for metallic people, so they don't get too stuck in a rut, because the world is always changing. Things are always changing. Situations are changing. Contexts are changing. So yes, that can be stressful to look at every single day, but once in a while going back and going, okay, this is something that I believe in, but is it still true? This is something I've decided, but is it still true?
Yeah, I mean, they have to sometimes update things, get more points of input in their data, not get stuck with certain conclusions they've made. They like not reinventing the wheel sometimes, and that can sometimes be very, very counterproductive. I've worked with drained, insecure metallics that want to force their way on things, and they stop innovating because they've already concluded this is what works. We have a system. We've got to follow the system. And I've also worked with very regenerated, inspired, confident metallic people who are like, oh, we can improve this here. We can optimize this here. We can tweak this here. And it's just directing the same personality in two different directions.
Yeah.
So we got a question here, which is, how do you turn depression or anxiety into a superpower? And that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
It's a loaded question because it takes into account so many different things. Like, you have to understand that we're talking about chemicals in the brain. We're talking about anxiety is usually a lack of dopamine. Depression is a lack of dopamine and serotonin levels and things like that. And when we talk about personality theory, obviously we don't want to replace a doctor. But there are certain things that you can do to release certain chemicals in the brain with stimulus, external stimulus, certain activities you can do. And turning it into a superpower is a little bit of a flawed narrative, but some of the things that happen to get us to that point is robbing ourselves of certain stimulus, robbing ourselves of certain activities that give us those rushes or those top-ups and redirect our mind to a more positive thing. So we have to be aware of, okay, if you're suffering from anxiety or depression, there are activities based on your personality that can give you a better state of mind.
Yeah.
And when we talk about regenerative spaces, I mean, for example, extroverts, moving, taking risks, doing fun things, adventures, things like that, that will be a dopamine rush in the brain. That will help them. If an extrovert robs themselves of those activities, they will not have the ideal dopamine levels. Obviously, it's a very, the conversation is...
It's a big conversation.
Big topic.
But if I can add a bit to this based on my own personal experience, since I do have quite extensive experience with both depression and anxiety, if you change a bit how you look at your depression and anxiety, because it can really feel like it consumes you. And yes, at times it will be so strong that it consumes you. But if you use it as a source of information, a source of information that tells you something is not working in your life or in how you're doing things or how you're approaching certain situations, then I wouldn't say necessarily that it turns into a superpower, but it can boost certain superpowers that you have. Yeah. You can look at that as, okay, something's going on and something's not working, so what do I need to do to change it? And I know with my depression and my anxiety, I could identify a lot of issues in my life that I knew needed to change, that maybe I had resistance to changing because it was uncomfortable, because it was scary, because it brought up insecurities, because it was risky, because I didn't know what the outcome would be, because I was stepping into the unknown. But I would use this information that I had of, okay, I'm not happy now, it's not working now, so I might as well take a risk because things already really suck. So I might as well take another risk, and if it sucks, it already sucks, so I'm not losing anything. If I have that mentality, then I can look at, okay, there's this situation in my life, and it can be one at a time, it can be half a problem at a time, it can be a quarter of a problem at a time, depending on how intense the situation is for you. But looking at, okay, maybe if I change this thing in my life, I'll be happier. Yeah. Maybe if I change this thing in my life, I'll be more confident. Maybe I'll practice this skill. Maybe I'll develop this aspect of my personality. Maybe I'll refine this hobby that I had a long time ago that I've, lost touch with. See if I can enjoy it. If you can't, it's possible with depression that you can't enjoy it, but you try it and see if it works. So using it as a source of information that something needs to change for you to rebalance your brain chemistry, that I think is the main step that will help you improve that situation.
One thing we talk a lot about in Develop Your Mind is turn your goals into something bigger than your fears. And we tend to give so much power to our fears that we reinforce our insecurities, reinforce the potential risks of things. So we get stuck. And what I've seen with people who suffer from depression and anxiety and things like that is they're varying different intensities, they're varying different contexts. Some people have situational depression and anxiety, some people have chronic imbalances that many times do need professional, whether it be natural supplementation or medical. But So again, it's impossible to do a one-size-fits-all thing. But I think the first step is make a decision that you want to live a better life. I've gotten the pleasure of knowing a lot of people who've throughout their journeys, and I think the people who've seen the biggest changes are the ones who had that hunger to live, that hunger to improve their lives, that knowledge that it will get better one day. Today is a hard day, but it will get better, and who have that hunger and that drive, and despite the challenges and despite the setbacks, they keep with that drive to improve things. And yes, many times it's a wholesome approach that includes a mix of diet, exercise, supplements, personal development, sometimes medicine. It depends on each individual's contexts. But I've certainly seen people who have decided to go through that journey, transform their lives to something and literally turn it into a superpower, in the sense that it was maybe the motivator to level up and educate themselves. And I've seen people who've gone through these journeys go from being so depressed, sometimes suicidal, sometimes stuck in the room, not able to go out for months. Sometimes I've seen people who have had, every type of self-destructive decision-making for a period, whether it be drugs, whether it be eating disorders, whether it be many different things. And I think the people who have had the most hunger to live, or the most kind of the internal narrative of, I know it will get better, I know there's other possibilities out there, when they've gone through that journey to educate themselves, to seek help, to seek professional help, to take actions, to make changes, to take risks, to take that leap of, I'm going to face this fear, I'm going to take this action, it's empowering. It's a rush. I recently was talking to someone who was facing their fear of elevators. Of who would get panic attacks and would cry, would not be able to get into elevators at all, and who spent years taking stairs and sometimes canceling opportunities because the idea of stepping into an elevator was so strong that they couldn't do it. And it was like, what happened is, she came to a point where, this isn't acceptable, I have to face this fear. So she started seeking advice. She asked her mother, when did it start? And she started to figure out what were the contributing factors. She spent hours online educating herself on the risks and how the elevators worked, and all the support, which for those of you who are afraid of elevators, I think there's 6 different points back up. So they're very, very safe.
Depending. I think the minimum is about it has to have 6 times the strength necessary to hold the elevator.
So they're very, very safe. But anyway, she recently told me that she faced it. She stepped into the elevator. Yes, she cried. Yes, it was hard. Yes, it was very, very stressful. But once she did it, there was a certain rush. There was a certain feeling of accomplishment. And I've seen this time and time again. We've seen it with you. There was a long period where you didn't step out of the house, where you didn't have friends, where you didn't get any of the ideal stimulus for you, and you would rob yourself of those things because you had amplified the potential risks in your mind, and you gave too much power to your fears. So you didn't verify certain, also sometimes incorrect data you didn't verify because you had concluded that was it, and facing it was a challenge. But then when you started seeking out more information, get clarity on different things, all of a sudden your life became much more rich, and you get much more of the stimulus naturally in your day-to-day life that gave you a bit more balance in your brain. So that's not to say, I mean, you've diversified and you've explored many different avenues, but I think, and you have even days today that are challenging, but I mean, the difference, I think, when you decided to, okay, I'm going to face these fears, I'm going to step out, I'm going to try this, it's scary, but I'm going to face it. I mean, those have been like the moments where you level up and where you've been able to turn this kind of depression and anxiety into superpowers, in the sense that, I mean, you suddenly were making more money than me, having more fans, more success, touring the world, doing badass things before me. And a lot of that was motivated because of your hunger to overcome your depression and anxiety. I mean, you got into this because of that.
My depression and anxiety basically started around the time of puberty. So I hit what I felt was rock bottom very early in life. So I basically had to make the decision, okay, like, do I take the chance on life and trying to make it work, or do I give up now before having tried? And so that did motivate me to pursue a lot of personal development. And I want to add a little bit to the conversation of facing your fears, because I know some people hear that information about facing your fears is important to overcoming them, and they take it to a bit of an extreme where they push other people's fears onto other people. That's not what we want.
Push other people's fears onto other people?
Yeah, like, oh, you're afraid of this? I'm going to help you overcome it by pushing it onto you and forcing you into those situations without you being in the right mental state, without you being prepared, without you wanting it.
Pushing them to face their fears.
Yeah.
Because the phrasing at least confuses me.
Pushing people to face their fears, but not in like an encouraging, hey, this could be an avenue that works for you kind of way, but like basically putting people's fears right in their face when they're not wanting it. That's a very different situation.
Mm-hmm.
Overcoming your fears is an internal process.
Yes.
There are going to be times when it's not the right moment. There are going to be times when there's so many other situations going on in your life that you can't afford to have a meltdown, that you can't afford, and you do need to avoid certain triggers. Right before an important job interview, you want to avoid your triggers. Right before certain situations, in the middle of certain situations, you do want to avoid triggers and play things safe to get through those situations. So it's for you to figure out for yourself, for your own process, okay, right now I've got a bit of freedom to play around, to take certain risks, to it being okay if I have a meltdown in public, it being okay if, I suddenly need to reach out to somebody in an emergency. It's such a personal process that you can't do that process for another person on their behalf. You can support them based on the steps that they're taking, based on the decisions that they're making, based on when they reach out and say, hey, can you help me out in this situation?
It goes a little bit back to what I was saying about earthly people.
Mm-hmm.
We want to help people with a lot of intensity, but timing is key. Knowing when someone is ready to level up, when someone is hungry, when someone is at a mental state that even though they might suffer from depression, anxiety and things, they are ready to explore the next step. I think, and this goes into play with regenerative spaces. If someone is in a regenerative state, they're much more agile, flexible, and capable of facing their fears than if they're totally drained, fatigued, burned out, and have brain fog and just can't cope, right? Yeah. So sometimes it's like, okay, and I know this with you, I think this is one of the things that at least me being able to help you, many times instead of exactly pushing you to face a fear you have to do it, it's more about let's do this activity that will recharge your battery, that'll distract you, that will reduce the intensity in your mind, will reduce the risk, and then afterwards we face it together. And that has worked very well. Yeah. But back before that, I was pushing you, let's do this, let's go, let's do it, you can do it, you're a badass, you're awesome, and a motivational speech, and it wouldn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, I mean, sometimes help someone recharge the battery, help reduce also the energy leaks in their life. If there's something that's draining someone, stressing someone, try to eliminate those things from their lives, try to influence them to change those things. If you can patch an energy leak, you can help them recharge the battery. You can help them feel more confident by also assigning them certain tasks or projects or exercises that they can do with ease. I've seen this a lot. Like, don't go straight for, like, it's like if you're training to become an Olympian. You don't go straight to the heaviest weights. You don't go straight to the longest marathon. You don't go straight to the hardest thing. You build up for it. So any skill you want to learn, you have to practice to get there. You're going to fail in the process. You're going to get rejected in the process. You're going to make mistakes in the process. That's okay. It means you're growing. But just don't make the mistake of putting yourself in those situations that will stress you out too much. There'll be too much pressure. And depending on the personality, there are some people that respond very poorly to pressure. There are some that respond better to pressure than others. A fiery person might respond well to more intense situations than an airy person who might escape and shut down as a result of it. So that is also another variable you have to take into account.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think if you let your depression, your anxiety motivate you to get educated, to seek help, to make changes, to not rob yourself of certain activities that might be able to get you to a better balance chemically in the brain, what's going to happen? You might be able to suddenly unlock certain capacities you had inside, and suddenly it does become a case of turning pitfalls into superpowers. I myself, I haven't talked as much about my anxieties as my sister, in the sense that my sister's the traditional case of a very introverted, also shy. Shy is fear of judgment. Introversion is need for less social stimulus. So she had both introversion with shyness, and who has suffered from panic attacks, from depression, from many different, very intense, more chronic situations. I have been more of a social anxieties due to fear of rejection, and very societal, very, fear of rejection in dating, fear of rejection in sometimes in sales environment, fear of rejection when it comes to expressing myself if I feel that other people might have opposing views or might not understand me or whatever. So there are different moments where I have lost my voice, where I've lost my confidence, where I've lost my where I've shut down and basically given up in many different things. And obviously in the situations where it's more situational, where it's more very directly a result of being afraid of a very specific type of judgment, a very specific type of rejection, that is a case of, okay, well, if you face those fears, if you work on those specific things. For example, with me, one thing I've had to do a lot, and it still stresses me out, but like the rejection challenge, trying to get rejected romantically, trying to get rejected in sales, trying to do things that step me out of my comfort zone to make me realize, it's less likely that I get rejected, or my mind over amplified the risks and things like that. So sometimes desensitizing myself to things has helped, but also educating myself on certain narratives that were flawed. For example, with me, I thought that communicating desire or interest romantically or sexually was an offense, that it was wrong, that it was selfish, all men were selfish, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, there are many narratives amplified now by the Me Too movement, so I didn't want to express any type of desire, any type of thing. I would friend-zone myself. I'd be like, I don't want to offend anyone, so I'm going to walk here, like I'm just going to shut down, right? And those were when I learned, okay, if you communicate desire and interest in a way that is generous, kind, inclusive, it's actually a compliment. It's not an offense. It's all about how you do things. And so when I started changing my internal narrative, I started being less nervous socially, less anxious socially. I still have a lot of social anxieties, way, way more than anyone probably could possibly imagine, seeing me in my field doing the things I do. But the process is different. I think that's another thing. But it doesn't matter if you're in a case like my sister, where it's been more chronic for many, many years, or it's more situational like mine. It's about taking action, but more so than anything, choosing that there is a possibility for something better. And just that first step, that changes a lot. I mean, that it's one of the best things you can do. I mean, one thing I sometimes talk about when it comes to personal development is I am frustrated with a lot of unethical, not so nice things that happen in the industry. A lot of systems that are made to make money exclusively, that are made to take advantage of people. A lot of things that don't take into account personal context and a one-size-fits-all. The many things I don't like in the industry. And in the beginning, I would get very, very frustrated with those things that just weren't kind and empowering and ethical. And I would lose a lot of sleep and energy over it. But something I have learned and something I've seen is the sole act of someone choosing to invest in themselves, to improve themselves, to go through a personal development journey, to make changes in their lives, maybe cut out negative influences, maybe respect themselves more, maybe understand themselves more, maybe find themselves and discover themselves. I mean, everyone's journey is different. But just that decision, no matter what path you take, can be life-changing. And I've seen people change their lives in systems with narratives and tools and things that I don't find empowering, but I've seen a positive change in them because they decided to level up.
Yeah.
And that is something powerful.
Yeah, no, I've been in that situation where I've invested in certain personal development processes and certain techniques, and I've had certain mentors that in very key moments, they have really, really fucked up in terms of what they said and how they approached the situation, a question that I asked, and so on. But even that, because I came with that attitude of, I'm here to change my life, I'm here to change the situation, whatever I have to figure out to do so, somehow even that fuck up has been okay and been part of the process of my growth. Like, oh, this person who's super successful, who helps millions of people around the world, who, is really changing lives for the better, is also human, also messes up, also misunderstands, also makes mistakes, also has insecurities, also has their issues. Even that for me has been like, oh, okay, so if they can do it, I can do it, you know?
Yeah.
So, when you have that mentality of, I'm going to improve my life, I'm going to solve my problems, I'm going to level up, you can spin anything that happens in your life in the right direction that fuels you instead of that stops you.
That thing about putting a spin on things, that is powerful. That is a skill that people should develop. I think that's something that I've generally been very good at in most cases, not in my romantic life for many years, but aside from that, I think I've been able to put a very good spin on many things. And I think if you want to have certain perseverance, certain patience, which many of your life goals will take many years, whether it be overcoming depression, anxiety, those will be long journey. Whether it be an entrepreneurial venture, it'll take years. Whatever education, it'll take years. Academic achievements, it'll take years, right? A lot of times we need patience. And yes, there'll be many challenges on the road that will sometimes distract us, which will make you feel like an imposter, will make you feel like a failure, will make you feel incapable, will challenge you. And yes, I think being able to put a positive spin on things and taking control of that narrative is very powerful. I mean, I sometimes get judged for being too good at that, in the sense that I'm called the eternal optimist sometimes, and things can be falling. Steve is like, yeah, sometimes things can be falling down, and things can be really, really stressful, sometimes financially, sometimes things break, technology breaks. I mean, in the world of entrepreneurship, there are ups and downs and surprises and valleys, and it's never a straight line. And I generally can have a really good mentality. Oh, well, this is an opportunity to level up here, and this is an opportunity to explore this. And the fact that this video was destroyed and terrible is an opportunity to now learn shutter speed on cameras. So let's take this as an opportunity to learn and grow, instead of being like, all that work, all those hours of work were destroyed. No, okay, it's a setting in the camera. Let me educate you. Let's learn this. Now we can level up. How exciting. Sometimes being able to see the good in something bad it's a skill set. It's a skill set, and it's, if you really challenge yourself, almost every single thing in the world, you can find something good. And it's like, look at wars. I hate wars, but look at all the innovation. Like, there's less red tape, there's more investment into infrastructure, in technology, technological advances. I mean, we have the internet thanks to the military. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can very easily go and say that's terrible, but then you can also on the flip side be, what innovations came up? What level up came from that? What did we learn? I mean, the Second World War was so destructive, but as a world, There are many policies that came into place that now mean we live in a much safer world where there are rules of war, where there are communities and different. The world has come together after wars in ways to rebuild, reconstruct, and yes, the wars themselves were absolutely terrible. But I'm just painting you this picture not to justify anything bad, not to say that anything bad is good, but to say out of your most difficult periods, you might be able to find something good. You might be able to find that led me to seek out this help, led me to seek out this opportunity, led me to level up here, led me to explore this here, led me to take this step here, or led to this innovation, or led to this growth. And being able to spin those things is powerful. It's powerful. It's a skill set that you can develop. Yes, certain personalities in certain environments, in certain contexts, certain individuals will have more ease than others, but it's a skill set you can develop.
Yeah.
And that's something worth developing, because I've seen people, and as a leader, as an entrepreneur, I get to kind of work on instilling that type of skill set and training that type of skill set. And in the beginning, when people are being onboarded onto Develop Your Element as new staff, obviously they might come in with a certain set of insecurities, a certain set of negative narratives. And we do a lot of different things to kind of redirect to a more positive narrative and reduce the fear of risks and kind of encourage a mindset of, oh, risks are good, mistakes are good, we can learn, we can grow. I mean, in Facebook, they have the motto, move fast and break things, because they understand that breaking things is an opportunity to innovate. And if you're not innovating, if you're not taking risks, you're not innovating. So, yeah, I mean, in our lives, look at it that way too. And develop that. And sometimes you might want to build a support network.
Yeah.
That's something that also we sometimes mention, build a good support network, because sometimes by ourselves it can be a little bit hard. I know with my situational imposter syndrome, fear of rejection, and negative internal narratives, I have been able to overcome a lot of the challenges by building a good support network.
Yeah.
I mean, without the help of my sister, without the help of Steve, without the help of Nata, David, my mother, without the help of the team, without the help of all these people who help me every day step out of my comfort zone, take more risks, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And that's not me being negative. It's me just valuing and understanding that sometimes, and especially for extroverts, it's so much easier when you have a support network. But introverts as well, their support network will be smaller. It'll be 1 or 2 people that they trust deeply, more so than 10 people or 20 people or 100 people. But yes, build your support networks, because, like, for example, right now in the last week, I finally launched my personal YouTube channel. I finally launched my personal website. Well, it's still being developed, but it's finally on a basic version up there. And I'm exposing myself in a way I've never done before, because my team challenges me, because it pushes me, because it helps me see that I'm over-amplifying certain risks in my mind. And with that support network, things get easier.
Yeah.
Things get easier. So, yeah, do that.
Yeah, no, and I think this is a good point. As you said, to emphasize a little bit with extroverts, it's something that obviously everybody needs. But for extroverts, I think that's a key part of how they turn their pitfalls into superpowers, because they are more socially oriented, because they are more the type who go out and create either groups of friends or project-based teams. They live more social lives. So who you spend your time with is going to really influence the kinds of decisions you make, how you cope with certain situations, how you cope with challenges. And I can say, for example, for the electric type, sometimes that need of social stimulus and excitement and adrenaline can be so high that electric people can get mixed up with the wrong kinds of people. Not to call somebody a wrong kind of person, but in terms of, people that aren't living the kind of life and encouraging the kind of situations that individual personally wants for themselves. Whereas that same skill of building friendships, of getting along with people. You know, electric people are the best at getting along with anybody and talking with anybody.
They're friends with everyone until they have a reason to not be.
Any topic can be brought up, any situation can be brought up, and they're so ready to come with a joke, a friendly comment, to bond, to ask questions, to add what they know. So they can use that skill to build really positive, really encouraging groups of friends and teams and support networks. And I think when the people that I've seen that are electric that have been able to do that, it just creates such a positive base because that social interaction is regenerative for them. But if it's positive social interaction that encourages them to seek out their goals, then it's like maximizing that.
Here's the thing. Electric people are social chameleons.
Mm-hmm.
They can adapt to any social environment. They can make friends anywhere very fast. And they're social chameleons, which means if they become friends with extroverts, no. I just got a funny comment by Steve behind the scenes. He's trolling a little bit. He was like, he's electric. He says, it regenerates me to tell strangers, me llama Papa Dulce. So he goes around Mexico saying, me llamo Papa Dulce. It means,
it's playing a bit with words. And because he has a bit of a foreign accent, it's not clear exactly which word he's saying. And that kind of adds to it. It can be sweet potato. It can be sweet daddy. It can be sweet pope.
Yeah, but it's not sweet potato as in sweet potato, the food. It's literally sweet and potato, which it's called something totally different in Spanish, but it's hilarious. He goes around everyone. Me llamo Papa Dulce, me llamo Papa Dulce. Yeah, he regenerates a lot with doing that, and we just go like, yup, we don't know him. We don't know him. It's fine. Yes, before I laughed about that, what I was going to say is electric people, they're social chameleons. And I've seen people, electric people level up by surrounding themselves by very entrepreneurial, responsible, driven people. And I've seen them level down big time by surrounding themselves by toxic environments filled with drugs and bad decision making and crime and whatever, and I've seen sometimes the same individuals be able to, when they spend time with one crowd and versus another crowd, suddenly everything changes. And I mean, there is very common narrative within personal development. There's a famous quote that's like, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And while obviously with personality theory, we debunk that a bit, there's certainly some truth to the fact that your environment affects you a lot, and that's what we call societal state. I mean, how your society, your environment molds you, guides you, sometimes distracts you and takes you down certain paths. And when it comes to especially extroverted people and especially electric people, one very fast way to level up is start spending time at entrepreneurship, networking events, and surround yourself by successful, happy people that know how to live life happily and make a responsible, take responsible decisions. That's a very fast way for them to level up.
Yeah.
I've seen how fast they adapt to a new job or a new environment where they they level up so fast. They're so agile. They're so quick. They're so impulsive. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
But every personality benefits by surrounding themselves by certain positive influences, by people who care about them, who take into account their context, that support them, that challenge them, that don't let them settle, because we all are very good at staying in our comfort zone, and we need those friends to kind of give us a wake-up call. Like, I myself, I've shared it with the podcast very openly. I was very good at hiding behind the Develop Your Element logo, and one of the challenges with the growth we've faced has been I have pushed other people to make videos, and I've pushed other people to be in front and center, and because of my imposter syndrome, like only if there was like very big speaking events with huge crowds and things like that, where it'd be like, okay, well then my fire would regenerate and let's do it. But like keeping a consistency on YouTube, on Instagram, with live events, doing things where I was very fun and center, despite one of my personalities really enjoying that, it has been very hard because of my imposter syndrome. And I had people on the team be like, yo, time to step out of your comfort zone. We're gonna help you. We'll make it happen. Like, we're here for you. But like, you have all these great skills, all these great capacities. We're here because we know the value of Develop Young and then the tools, but also because we believe in you and your ethics and your values and blah blah blah. And there's a reason why we're here. But like, but you got to share this with the world. You got to step out. You got to do this. You got to step up. And it's like, and this goes to show. I mean, I think here at Develop Element, we try to be very, very forward with you guys. Like, we don't try to fake things and be like, oh yeah, our lives are perfect and we have no issues and no problems. No, it's if you're an entrepreneur, if you're not having these moments of feeling like an imposter, you're probably not taking enough risks. You're staying in your comfort zone. You're not like. All entrepreneurs at some point have felt that way when they're stepping into something where it's like unknown and like, okay, I don't know anything about what they're talking about. I gotta educate myself and level up quickly. Although I still discover that I have no idea what I'm doing, things like that, right? So, but yeah, I mean, we just want to be very upfront and honest with you guys that, yeah, I mean, it's part of our reality. But I think one of the cool things is with any personality, show up every day. Show up every day, step up every day, ask yourself, where can I step up? Where can I take a risks? Where am I too comfortable? And I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, you can only grow with discomfort. No, you can also grow with some comfortable things. I mean, there are many things about the team that are very comfortable that have helped me grow. But yes, when the team starts getting too comfortable, it gets complacent, and sometimes they need a little bit of a kick in the butt. A nice one. I mean, more of a motivation, like, let's do this, let's do a team project, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things that go into turning pitfalls into superpowers. But I think the main point to emphasize is identify what are the things that are draining you in your life. How can you fix that? Where are the things where you're robbing yourself of activities that can recharge you? Make sure not to rob yourself of that. Where are you misdirecting your personality and creating more conflict and more drama instead of more connections and more productivity, more results? Where have you concluded that you're broken or you are there's no hope? And can you seek out certain help or take certain actions or get out of that point where you've come to certain conclusions? What friends do you have that might be very good to help you level up, whether by showing you in terms of leading by example or by challenging you? I think you need a mix of both. I have friends who make me level up just by me seeing them and admiring them, and I have friends who help me level up by challenging me and not accepting less. For example, Steve behind the scenes here, he's very good at being very direct with me. Sometimes I want to kill him because sometimes he becomes too metallic and straightforward. But like, for example, the website that we've been building, it was very, very hard for me to build it. And once it finally was like near ready, it was like, okay, so what are you going to sell? And I'm like, sell? Me? So what about giving mentoring sessions? What about doing this? What about launching this? What about doing that? And it was like, it was hard for me because it was facing, like, I'm quite good at sales. I have lots of sales experience. I have trained and recruited sales teams, hundreds of salespeople. But one thing that I have learned is selling myself. Myself is a very different story than selling other people and other people's products. And my insecurities kicked in. And he was like, no, you have to do this. I mean, it's time to level up. It's time to face this. You can do it. I believe in you. What do we need to do it? And he was like, let's do it. I'm here. I'll help you do it. And it's like, okay. And thanks to him challenging me, we're about to launch things. We're going to launch mentoring sessions. We're going to launch digital courses. We're going to launch a lot of things faster because he challenged me, for example. And there are other people who have shown me by them doing it that, there are possibilities out there. Oh, okay, I learned from them. So there are different things that you want to do in terms of that.
I want to elaborate a little bit on that point because, yes, partly it's definitely the people that are in your life and how they directly interact with you, but also seeking out role models, even if they're not like, your 100% idle in every aspect of who they are. Like looking at your own situation, okay, there's this part of my personality or this situation that I'm dealing with that maybe right now it's not working, maybe right now I'm insecure about it, maybe right now it's a challenge for me. Who can I see out there in the world? Whether it's someone I know, someone in media, anybody who's doing that same thing or dealing with that same situation, but in a way that I would like to do it, in a more positive way, in a way that, you know, I see as a positive future for myself. Because sometimes just it's a matter of seeing examples of how it can be done. Because we aren't taught how to use our personalities. We aren't taught how to overcome challenges. We all have different upbringings. Our parents or guardians have their own different challenges, their own different insecurities. Our teachers too, all our mentors, all our bosses, all our friends. You know, we're all kind of in this same situation called life. So we don't always learn how to deal with certain situations. So being able to look out into the world and look, oh, this person is doing it in a way that I want to learn from. Oh, this person is doing it in a way that's, you know, inspiring and motivating and positive. This person is doing it in a way that's kind and gentle and generous. This person is doing this in a way that is making me happy and making other people happy. Okay, how can I learn from those people? I think that's a really great trait because it's so easy to just see your own situation, see all the ugly parts of it, you know, all the nooks and crannies of every mistake you've ever made. And it's easy to get caught up in that. But being able to see positive examples of people who are like you in certain ways, even just people that are happy despite a situation that you feel you're not happy about in your own life, like, oh, okay, it's possible to be happy with this.
I think when it comes to role models, in development, we discuss this idea a lot of, you know, when you look up to people, make sure not to lose yourself in the process. And but that doesn't mean don't have role models. I mean, here on the team, I think if I mention the word or the name Gary Vee one more time, they'll kill me because on Instagram, I like the way he does videos. So I was like, okay, we got to have that little red progress bar like this, and we got to make the subtitles like this, and look at how cool this is, and look at this video, the way they've edited this. So I go up to the editors a lot, and I'm like, I want a video that inspired by this, but obviously will develop and branding and blah, 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 and content. But look, and like, because he inspires me. He inspires me to level up with my socials. There are different people, like, for example, when it comes to personality psychology, what's his face?
Brian Little.
Brian Little. He inspires me. The way he really thinks about the variables, the way he thinks about it, not about putting you in like boxes or labeling you, but really the nuances. He's a professor that has been at Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford. I'm not sure which one he's at right now. Maybe Cambridge. But really, I mention his name a lot too because he's inspiring. So I have people that I'm inspired by, that I learn from, but I don't lose my own ethics, my own values, my own things that I kind of want to share, my own context in the process. In the early days of entrepreneurship, yes, my previous business, I tried to, they do this at Apple, so we should do that. They do this at Google, we should do it. Thank you. So don't lose yourself, don't invalidate yourself, but certainly if someone inspires you to level up, if certain person inspires you to seek more information, educate yourself more, that's great. But never invalidate yourself, never lose yourself. Because I had many years of trying to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, the next Steve Jobs, the next Elon Musk, the next this, the next that. And obviously that never worked for me until I gained enough confidence to be like, okay, this is what I've identified, which is different from what exists in the market. This is our main differentiator. This is both content-wise different, in terms of ethics different, in terms of format different. This is where I can do different. Yes, this is kind of industry standard. This we can do in the way that kind of we seek standard in the industry. This we're going to do a little bit differently. But having enough confidence to sometimes do things that are different is going to be way better than being like, this is the proven path. I failed miserably when I tried to follow the proven path. And I started seeing way more traction, way more opportunities come my way when I started finding my own voice, my own narrative, my own approach. But I will say it's still every day inspired by brilliant minds who do things in a great way where I go, I want to learn from that person. That person has figured this part out that I haven't figured out yet. in this stage, I want to learn from this person. And yeah, different days of the week, I'm going like, so I want to learn from this person. I want to learn this from this person. And I mean, many famous actors, entrepreneurs, presidents have mentors. They do have people that they seek guidance from, who they get inspired by. And that's okay. That's great. That's amazing. I mean, we work in personal development for a reason, because we believe in supporting each other and uplifting each other. But just make sure, I want to stress again, don't lose yourself in the process.
Yeah.
And also one thing I want to emphasize is you're going to be your best when you are in your element, when you're unlocking your element and developing it and strengthening it and directing it well. You will not be your best when you're trying to copy other people with other personalities and other contexts.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons why I failed of following the proven path is I don't have the same personality and context as Steve Jobs, as Mark Zuckerberg, as Elon Musk, as all of these greats, because I have a different personality, I have different context, I have different skill sets, I have different challenges, I have different instincts, I have different values, different ethics. So I'm going to naturally have much more success when I take into account my context.
Yeah.
And that's something we talk a lot about in Develop Your Element. So how can you, based on your context, your situation, your personality, your goals, your challenges, your resources, your network, how can you turn all of this and direct it into superpowers? How can you stop self-sabotage? How can you stop internal narratives that conclude certain things prematurely? And how can you strengthen both your skills and your support network? That's really, I think, the key. And yeah, I think that covers today's episode. Next week, what are we covering? Is it, I believe we're covering diversifying measures of success. Is that next week?
No, that's a couple of weeks from now or so.
That's gonna be a good episode. Okay, I don't remember what next week's episode is, but if you want to be informed when we have new episodes, make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell here on if you're watching us live, and if you're watching us on or listening to us on other platforms like Spotify and such, make sure to subscribe. And yeah, we'll see you next week, same time, same place.